Hello, and welcome to my deep dive into the horror of the American Midwest. Today we're going to break down the origins of American Gothic horror, how it ties specifically to the Midwest, the various thematic and visual tropes of the genre, and some examples of literature and films that play into Midwestern Gothic. Now, disclaimer, although I'm alluding mostly to the Midwest in this video, it's important to point out how these stereotypes can apply all across rural America. Although each region of America has their unique features, it's beautiful that we are all united by general identifiable stereotypes. In fact, I'd say the biggest divide in American culture is between rural and urban areas. This is also to say that I'm aware that Pennsylvania is not completely a Midwestern state, but for the sake of this video, I may to refer to it as such. Anyways, so without further ado, let's begin. The genre of American Gothic branched off of European Gothic tales in the late 18th century, with the stipulation that it was adapted to the harsh landscapes and religious superstitions attributed to the English colonists settling in the New World. Colonists' understanding of Native American folklore added much to the literature in this early America. The Salem witch trials provided us with a notable historical route onto which we can establish the American propensity for religious anxiety, irrationality, fanaticism, Cain families, and the hypocritical fear of the other. Author Charles Brockden Brown is widely regarded as not just the father of the American Gothic, but also the father of the American novel as a whole. In his novels like Wieland from 1789 and Edgar Huntley from 1799, he utilizes America's isolated wilderness and plague-ridden cities and explored themes of religious fanaticism, human fragility, moral ambiguity, and psychological terror that suggested that the greatest horrors sprang from the irrational depths of the human mind, fueled by religion and the supernatural dark. He paved the way for other foundational figures like Edgar Allan Poe and Nathaniel Hawthorne. I won't be going into these men today, but I also wanted to mention authors William Faulkner and Flannery O'Connor, who added distinctly Southern cultural aspects to the American Gothic, and Cormac McCarthy, who extends into Appalachia. Despite these commonalities that can be found between all parts of rural America, these authors dive into elements that are not distinctly Midwestern. I would be remiss if I didn't mention painter Grant Wood and his 1930 painting titled American Gothic. Wood was at the forefront of the regionalist art movement of the late 1930s and 40s, whose goal was to depict realistic depictions of rural small-town life. Wood lived and died in Iowa, and he painted American Gothic during the early years of the Great Depression. He portrayed sturdy survivors, a father and daughter who had seen the cruel nature of the world, yet stayed steadfast in their beliefs and culture. The architecture of their house in the background has large Gothic windows, which match the sharp, three-pronged pitchfork in the foreground. This is a seminal piece, which helps establish the visual foundation that Midwestern Gothic was built from. Moving on, I want to talk about Andrew Wythe, also a painter, this time from Pennsylvania, who I think really built on to Grant's visual style. He also painted themes of human nature, loneliness, the passage of time, mystery, mortality, and the resistance of rural people. But his realist style is what fascinates me. When I see his paintings, I see nostalgia and truth. Living in the Midwest my whole life, I can think of so many moments that are nearly identical to the subjects he chooses to depict. I see wind blowing through an open window overlooking a field. I see a lonely man walking through town. I see a dead animal lying in a field on a cold autumn's day. I feel Christina's strength as she pulls herself through an empty field back home. The realism he depicts just shows the Gothic aesthetic that exists in the Midwest and rural America, without having to add any overtly creepy things. Macabre is always in its nature. Our contemporary artist, Andrea Kowch, depicts similar subjects in a hyper-realistic, almost uncanny style. However, she adds a magical and distinctly Gothic touch to her paintings. On her paintings, Kowch says, quote, "The lonely, desolate American landscape encompassing the painting's subjects serves as an exploration of nature's sacredness and a reflection of the human soul, symbolizing all things powerful, fragile, and eternal. These real, yet dreamlike scenarios serve as metaphors for the human condition, in juxtaposing the human form with animals and bygone uninhabited American landscape. I provide glimpses into rooms, those oftentimes chaotic places we possess internally. The rural Midwest landscapes of my home state serves as a backdrop for the stage of human emotion. The animals present are vehicles for expressing the feelings and underlying tensions suppressed behind the human mask. Symbolic explorations of the soul and events concerning our environment are expressed through the combination of these elements to transform personal ideas into universal metaphors. So that's just a bit of background knowledge of the foundations that we built our understanding of the genre off of. But don't worry, I'll be mentioning more artists and writers as we move forward. Now, another disclaimer, I'm about to break down various stereotypes associated with Midwestern Gothic, many that criticize religion and generalize people living in these areas, painting many things in a bad light. I feel like I've clarified this many times, but these are not facts about reality. These are tropes associated with the Midwest. I am not saying that all communities and people fit into these frameworks. This is about one specific genre. Now, let's get started. Cannot mention Gothic iconography without Christianity. In the Midwest, the majority of the population follows a Protestant denomination. While it provides a moral framework, sobriety, and sense of community, its rigid nature leads to repression. Gothic characters are often victims of deep-seated subjugation, which manifest themselves in psychological issues that lead to violence, psychological torment, or supernatural phenomena. The communal nature of the church and its rigid structure leads to loss of personal identity, particularly with young people, leading to self-destructive behavior. And while the church suffocates its followers, the local clergyman will often have the community's complete trust whilst hiding their heinous acts, often sexual in nature. He dangles over your head the fear of death and sin, pushing melancholic mortality instead of fruitful living. The insufficiency of the church causes even deeper problems in our modern world. To be Gothic is to yearn for God's presence, yet he escapes you. You surround yourself with crucifixes, you go to church every Sunday, you pray, you yearn for some supernatural presence to help you where the humans around you cannot. But he does not intervene on your behalf. You cannot overcome humanity's destructive free will and your own inherent sin. These communities are small and struggling to get by in our modern world. The isolation leads to superstition and local folklore to thrive as a way to explain the economically and physically harsh environment in which they live. Superstitions are not based in reason and science. They fill an intellectual void left by religious zealots. They may explain illness, death, or a bad harvest that can't be rationalized, and then these beliefs are carried down through generations, establishing family tradition. The Gothic idea of the past continuously haunts the present, or shall we say the sins of the father carry unto the sons. Large economic gaps plague these communities. Small Midwestern towns are often made up of few wealthy families, combined with some of the poorest families you've ever seen. While both sides of the economic spectrum converge, as they both often are plagued with generational trauma, distrust of others, crime, and drugs. As with the aforementioned Salem witch trials, these towns set up a facade of a loving community, but in reality, gossip and distrust run rampant, and people will throw their neighbors under the bus for often mundane reasons, but especially folks who are new to the community or just passing through. Taking it to the extreme are the Amish and Mennonite religious communities that live in the small enclaves throughout the Midwest. While I've personally had great experiences with the Amish and I try to support their local businesses, I would be remiss not to mention all the controversy, to say the least, things which go on in their communities. In essence, they take all the tropes of Midwestern culture to the extreme: rigid religious beliefs, an antiquated way of life, high-ranking, hypocritical men who get away with heinous sins, distrust of others in the outside world, and a propensity for scapegoating members of their own community. An early influence on Midwestern Gothic is Sherwood Anderson's Winesburg, Ohio, from 1919. It's a collection of short stories about people caught up in their repressed sexual desires, strangled in their small-town communities. In a similar setting, Gothic and mystery novel The Devil All the Time by Donald Ray Pollock is set in rural Ohio and West Virginia, and about extreme violence, superstition, and religious fanaticism found in impoverished communities. It showcases generations of sin and the unspeakable acts of zealots. On the theme of intergenerational sins, the narrator of the book states, quote, 400 or so people lived in Knockemstiff in 1957, nearly all of them connected by blood through one god-forsaken calamity or another, be it lust or necessity or just plain ignorance, end quote. Moving on, the Coen brothers' Fargo showcases a desolate Midwestern town who puts up a facade of politeness to hide their hypocrisy and horrific acts. In an isolated setting plagued by economic struggle and crime, much of the violence in Fargo is motivated by petty greed. Similarly, whilst recording her album titled Inbred, musical artist Ethel lived in a renovated church in Cambridge City, Indiana. near my hometown. The album discusses religious decay, generational trauma, and the corruption of innocence. One of the biggest distinctions of Midwestern Gothic is its emphasis on the existential threat of the environment and the psychological terror of isolation in the vast empty landscape. As with most things, Midwestern horror can also draw parallels to H.P. Lovecraft's cosmic horror, in that the region's physical isolation can be turned into existential isolation. The landscape can sometimes seem otherworldly, and its potential vastness is past human comprehension. Simultaneously, the region's symbol of fertility and bounty is also a symbol of claustrophobia and hidden evils. These are cornfields. The Midwest, the breadbasket, and corn go hand in hand. A crop native to the Americas has proved to be one of the most useful and valuable in the world. So naturally, the unending need for corn transforms a once wild landscape to a monotonous, never-ending sea of farms. Corn is a labyrinth, a place in which small towns fester and detach themselves, creating dark secrets and even darker histories. The monoculture of the Midwest also creates a sterile landscape that has lost the touch of Mother Nature. Corn, as a source of horror, was cemented in Stephen King's 1977 short story, Children of the Corn. The corn turns from a place of bounty to a place of ritual murder on behalf of, quote, he who walks behind the rose, aka an ancient pagan entity. The corruption of the innocent crop is further solidified with the cultist murderers being children, playing into what I mentioned earlier about a need for some divine force, whether good or evil. God is replaced with a pagan entity in this case. In the film, one of the children, Isaac, says, "In my dream the Lord did come to me, and he was a shape. It was he who walks behind the rose, and I did fall on my knees in terror and hide lest the fierceness of his face strike me dead." Another distinct, iconic characteristic of the Midwest is our violent, unpredictable weather, in particular the tornado. The tornado is a symbol of non-judgmental cosmic chaos, a show of the fragility of the human endeavor against nature. All perceived order and hard work is futile against a tornado. Paired with the tornado is the siren, unlike the noises of nature, like a cry of a bird or an animal, the most comforting ring of a church bell or wind chime. The tornado siren is a modern mechanical warning. It's a tool used for protection. However, in horror, it becomes a siren of unchangeable fate. The mechanical shriek comes out of nowhere and cuts through polite society. The siren itself is an inescapable terror that lurks in your ears even after it goes away. But paired with a tornado, it's unstoppable. In The Wizard of Oz, the tornado is used as a plot device signifying an existential shift in Dorothy's life. Her mundane, dreary world is ripped from its foundation and she is thrust into a surreal fairy tale world. Deer are culturally associated with the gentle wilderness, but often, especially at night on the side of the road, peering out through the cornfield, you see their large, reflective eyes and their bodies standing as still as an image. When they are found either on the side of the road or in the woods, mutilated or diseased, 'tis a symbol of corruption of the natural order. The moral decay of a small town can be reflected in the sickness of its innocent fauna. Similarly to the other horned creatures, the deer can be a reflection of a pagan demonic entity. Like the Celtic horned god, Chirunos is the lord of wild things, often associated with the Greek god Pan and the Roman god Faunus. These deities are often representing cycles of life, death, rebirth, and fertility. These horned creatures are linked with the devil. As with the goat, if you look into the soulless eyes of a deer, you may be peering into the unholy divine. An even more iconic staple of the Midwestern Gothic horror are the Wendigo, a creature originating with the folklore of the Algonquin people of the Great Lakes. A giant, emancipated creature with bits of skin pulled tightly over its bones, a stag head with sunken eye sockets, long jagged teeth, and a towering set of antlers. In the lore, as it is most commonly known, the Wendigo symbolized greed and the psychosis of cannibalism driven by famine. In the desolate asylum of the Midwest, human despair and desperation can turn into a literal, flesh-eating monster. While a Wendigo could be lurking in the little woods next to your house, what's far more likely are the ghosts from the horrific, mysterious past of small towns representing unresolved issues, secrets, and family trauma that is unable to stay buried. The Midwest is full of haunted Victorian manors, farmhouses, dilapidated barns, abandoned buildings, asylums, and bankrupt factories, grave sites, and old places of violence and war. There is no shortage of local ghost stories in every community. More notably, the Vasilla Axe murder house, where a family's domestic life was violated in an unsolved mass murder, and the Ohio State Reformatory, a massive Victorian Gothic prison, a site of institutionalized suffering. The horrors that happened here are somehow more chilling because they are tied to human failures rather than something supernatural. The last trope which I wish to touch upon are aliens. Aliens serve as a modern analog for the aforementioned classic Gothic monsters. Importantly, aliens are not specifically a Gothic trope, but they are a subversion of the genre that retains a similar tone. They are a force which breaches the boundary of the human mind. This threat from the cosmos replaces the more common threat of the paranormal or fellow humans. The crop circle is a common sign of aliens in media as well as abductions from isolated homes. The 2002 movie Signs uses these crop circles in a cornfield on an isolated property, a prelude to an alien invasion upon a seemingly normal rural family. This small-scale invasion makes the cosmic threat personal and unavoidable, which aligns perfectly with the Gothic focus on the domestic sphere. Taking place in the fictional city of Hawkins, Indiana, is the TV show Stranger Things. It juxtaposes 1980s Americana culture with an extra-dimensional realm. This horror is driven by government conspiracy and the disruption of small-town life. Where the Demogorgon, an alien monster, emerges upon Hawkins, Indiana, the extra-dimensional realm is a dark, cold, decaying reflection of the human world. It is a place that is unknowable outside of the literal realm of human comprehension. So there you have it, a journey through the dark heart of the American Midwest, where the horror is found in vast cornfields and quiet, isolated towns. We've seen how Midwestern Gothic takes the foundational themes of American Gothic, religious anxiety, psychological terror, and the burden of the past, and anchors them upon the unique landscape and culture of the heartland. From Grant Wood's stoic survivors to Andrew Wyeth's desolate realism, the region's aesthetics naturally lend themselves to the macabre. Ultimately, the genre is about the struggle against the forces larger than the individual, whether it's the oppressive conformity of a rigid faith, the economic struggle, the terrifying indifference of a tornado, or the ultimate unknowability of an alien entity in a lonely farmhouse. Midwestern Gothic suggests that the greatest horrors are often buried just beneath the veneer of Midwestern nice. It reminds us that even the most normal places, there is quiet despair, an old secret, or a lurking monster waiting to step out from behind the rose. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into Midwestern Gothic. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more deep dives into whatever macabre media I feel like talking about next. Also, please be sure to check out the description for my sources and lists of the books, artists, and films I discussed today. Until next time, try not to get lost in the cornfields.